Today I'm talking to my daughter Kylie. Kylie was instrumental in the care of my mom, her grandma, and we're just going to have a discussion about our life with my mom and Kylie's grandma, and how the journey began when she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and maybe even a little before, and what that journey looked like. So, hi Kai.
Hi Mom.
So just start by, from your perspective, your relationship with Grandma.
Well, from a very young age, you really instilled the importance of family in us. All of my earliest memories from childhood really are family-centric, and Grandma is at the front of that. So all my earliest memories involve Grandma. And even before the things that I can remember, I know one of the stories that just impacts me with Grandma was that when you went back to work when I was a baby and Dad was working full-time too,
Grandma was your caregiver.
From a very early age. From a very early age, it was so important for you to instill the importance of family in us, and all of my earliest memories involve our family all together. And of course, Grandma's at the very beginning of that. From a very early age, you did such a wonderful job of instilling the importance of family in us, and we always knew how important we all were to each other and the responsibility that we had as a family to one another. And one of the earliest stories I don't remember personally, but I always remember hearing that just really establishes the relationship between Grandma and I is when I was a toddler and you were going back to work full-time, and Dad obviously was working full-time, and you tried out a daycare situation for me, and you guys put me into a daycare. And Grandma at the time was working at Fashion 220, working full-time as she had for her whole life. And that first day you came to pick me up, and I was crying and I was disheveled and I wasn't happy, and you weren't happy, and you picked me up, you took me home, and you called Grandma right away and said, I don't think I can take her back there. This was awful. And Grandma retired that day and said, I'm going to take care of Kylie. And from that day on, Grandma was with us, and Grandma watched Tyson and I when we were little, and I can remember her taking me to preschool and all the things that we played with Grandma, and we were so close from such an early age. And when I think back to that story, Grandma changed her entire life that day to take care of me. And as we got down the road with Grandma, there was never a question of if I could, or there was never a question that I wouldn't take care of Grandma. So obviously me and you and Grandma had a very impactful relationship, and it sort of blurred the lines sometimes, I think, from daughter, mother, and grandmother. It was very much friend and confidant, and we were always family. We were always really close, but also we fulfilled so many other needs and relationships within each other. So we always had such a wonderful relationship, the three of us in specific. Not to say the rest of our family we didn't have great relationships with, but the three of us were always just so close. And Grandma, as you know, she got married so young, and she wanted to go to college. She wanted to do all these grand things with her life, but she got married young and had a family young, and she would have never changed that. But I probably inappropriately so felt that at times as I got older, and high school and college for me, that I should be that college friend that Grandma didn't have. And so many times I wanted just to make Grandma laugh and engage Grandma in something just sort of silly and sometimes inappropriate, and have her feel a little rebellious. And we have many good
Many good memories.
Many good memories doing goofy things with
Some
Grandma.
of my best laughs are between you, me, and Grandma.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. When we had the store, and Grandma every day would come when I owned the store, and would just come in the morning and sit at the table and think she was helping a little bit.
Yeah.
And it was such a great reciprocal relationship, Grandma and I at the store. And every once in a while, I'd say, Grandma, let's go, just go put the clothes sign up, and let's just leave. Oh, we can't. And no, let's do it. And we'd go and put the clothes
Yeah.
sign up, and we'd leave and go get something to drink, or go have lunch. And Grandma always thought that was a lot of fun. And when we were researching the store, and we were researching other before we had the store, do you remember Grandma and I took her to research other stationery
yes.
shops, other paper stores.
Yes,
I took Grandma.
I do remember.
And I'll never forget, she thought we were doing something illegal because I was taking notes.
Yes.
And Grandma felt like we were doing something dangerous.
Yes.
She said, should I wear all black?
Yes, and she
So-
was serious.
She was serious. So I always liked doing something a little bit different with Grandma.
Yeah.
And through high school and college, you guys always would be so mad at me. I'd have Grandma listen to Howard Stern.
Yes.
And she would ask me such wonderfully inappropriate questions,
Yeah.
what this meant, what that meant. And we just had always
Yeah.
the most fun. We were so fortunate growing up that Grandma was never far away. When we lived in Hudson, she was just a mile down the road, her and Papa in Streetsboro, and Grandma was so close to us. And then eventually when we built on Clayton Court, Grandma had an apartment downstairs at our house, so I was always so lucky to have Grandma so close and so nearby.
Yeah.
And at the time that she lived in the apartment in our home was a time when she was having multiple surgeries. And at that time, when Grandma was living in the apartment in our home on Clayton Court, she had her double mastectomy that had the drains, and she had knee replacements and hip replacements. She had her bowel resection and a colostomy.
Yeah.
And there were so many times that she needed post-operative care. And I was 16, 17, 18 years old, and never considered a career in healthcare, never felt that I had any predisposition to taking care of those types of things. But that was Grandma to me. And we always joke, you would do your best to help Grandma, and maybe you were just too close to the situation with Grandma. But Grandma would say, no, you know what? That's not. And even though you're a nurse and you were eager to help her right away with anything that she needed, it was difficult for you to provide that care to Grandma. And I just always felt that I just had to, and truly that I wanted to. And I always felt that it was the right thing for me to do. And Grandma always told me, I was just so careful, and that she would prefer me to help her with things than other people. And that was comforting for me to know that I could do those things for Grandma. So as I went to college and Grandma moved out of that apartment into her senior living apartment, that was a transition, but she was never far away. And although I left to go to school, I came right back. And I was fortunate.
Best friends.
Grandma really, really was my best friend. Even when I ultimately decided to go to nursing school and then had that first job, I was so lucky after I went to nursing school to get the job as a school nurse. And here I was so fortunate to be able to work a mile down the road from Grandma's senior living apartment. And although she was independent in the apartment, and probably more so selfishly, came by every day. And I was so lucky, it gave something for Grandma to look forward to as well. So I got out of school every day at 2:30, 3 o'clock, and would come to
Yeah.
grandma's, and she'd be baking, cooking, doing something for me,
Yeah.
have something cut out that
Yeah.
she wanted to show me. And almost every night for 2 years, I would come to grandma's and I would eat an entire dinner with grandma,
Right.
and then go home before John got home.
Right.
And then I would eat dinner with him again. But I so looked forward to that time with grandma. And unfortunately, over that 2-year period of time when I was as a school nurse right down the street from grandma, and she was in that apartment, is when we started to notice
Right.
some of the cognitive changes with grandma. And it was probably more difficult for me to pick out the changes because I would see her sometimes 2 and 3 times a day,
Yeah.
and not because I needed to at that time. Early on, if I was running, if I had extra time before work, I'd stop in and see grandma in
Yeah.
the morning.
Yeah.
And then I'd come by later and, maybe run errands or whatever. But as we got closer down the road, with her disease, I think I was pregnant with Harper when
Yeah.
we really started to notice
Right.
some of the changes with grandma. And at the time, some of them we thought were really funny.
We did.
And inappropriately
laugh
so.
with her.
Absolutely laugh, and she would laugh too. I remember one time we went over and grandma was so eager to give us something to eat, and she goes, guys, I have soap.
Yes.
And she couldn't believe that she had said that. She was certain
We
she
laughed
said.
out loud at how silly that was.
And we constantly made fun of her for it afterward,
Yeah.
but there were certain things like that.
Yeah.
And then misplacing things, and then
Yes.
putting things in odd places. And it was all very innocent and never really drew any true concern until I started going more when I was pregnant, and I would just want to lay on the couch at grandma's and rest, but started noticing she needed a little bit more help with things. And I don't know if you remember, there was a period of time she was complaining of some cloudiness, of a headache.
Yeah.
And I remember I had just come from work. I have my stethoscope, I have all my stuff in my bag, and I took grandma's blood pressure, which typically ran very high, and it was very low.
Right.
And that prompted me to take a look at her medications, and grandma meticulously set up her weekly pills. And I started noticing, well, there's more of some in here.
Yeah.
And we ended up realizing she was taking 3 of her blood pressure medications
Yes.
instead of 1.
Right.
And so she was having,
She was double dosing
she
herself.
was triple dosing
Yeah.
herself on her medications. So I spent a lot of time
Yeah.
reorganizing. And you noticed on the phone when we would say to grandma, did you take your pills? She would say yes, because she took them every day. Of course she would say yes. That's what she does every day. And we would say, what did you eat today? And she would tell us what she ate, which grandma was a creature of habit. So
Yeah.
it was always
She
the
would tell
same-
us her whole meal.
She would tell us everything.
Yeah.
And then I would start to put the pieces together and say, well, grandma couldn't have eaten that because I was here and she didn't have any toast to make an egg salad sandwich. Or she said she ate Jell-O, she just bought it, but I took her to the store.
Yeah.
And she drove at that time.
She did.
And I would take her to the store, and there'd be times where I'd say, Grandma, I can't come today, but I'm going to come tomorrow. We'll go to the store tomorrow. And I would call her, and I wouldn't get an answer. And then I'd get nervous.
Right.
And I was so close, so then I would run up, and I'd pass the store, and I saw Grandma's car,
Right.
and I saw Grandma walking. Do you remember?
I do.
Walking down the aisle, and she had passed where her car was, and she was pushing the cart.
You were watching her.
And I was just so thankful that
I feel like you called me
I'm sure I did.
while you
I'm
were
sure
watching
I did.
her not know where to go.
And I was just trying to see, I was just hoping that she knew what she was doing, that she knew where she was going, that maybe she was putting the cart away, or saw someone she knew. She had friends at her apartment complex. Maybe she saw someone she knew, and I just hoped that she was intentionally had passed her car, and then when it occurred to me, she got past all the cars, and there was nowhere for her to continue to walk. I realized I need to go and help her, and I was just so fortunate to be able to do that at that time and help her get in the car and get her groceries and then take them all up, which, God bless Grandma, she always found a way to get her stuff
did.
up, and she was so self-sufficient that it was hard to see her in a position where she was vulnerable, and
It is.
where we really couldn't deny any longer that something else was going on.
Right.
Just before the family decided that Grandma could no longer live on her own, I think the two main things that happened, along with her medications getting mixed up and her over-medicating herself, even when I would reorganize everything, and I did it meticulously for weeks, she still continually took them incorrectly, and we just couldn't deny it any longer. And my visits to Grandma's apartment were more frequent, usually 3 or more times a day, so that I could be there at the times she took her medications.
That's right.
And there was a time I came and it absolutely smelled like a fire in her apartment. And on one hand, I think I was glad knowing that she had cooked herself something, because it had gotten to a point where she wasn't cooking the big meals and baking like she was when I would first come to that apartment a couple years prior when I was working. Held like she had been cooking, and on one hand I was so glad that she had been, because for months she really wasn't cooking anymore, she really wasn't baking. We weren't sure if she was really eating anything that I didn't make or set out for her, because she would say that she had, but there wouldn't be any evidence to suggest it. And we were like detectives, and I was calling you constantly saying, I took her to the store, we bought these certain things, they're all unopened. Or she said she had this, I know she doesn't have it. But that day I came in and I smelled something, and it went to realizing it's something burnt. It smells like there'd been a fire in here. And I went and looked in the trash. I could just tell that's where it was coming from. And she had put pots and pans in her microwave. And I'm not sure even for how long, but they were completely burnt. And when I opened up her microwave, there was a fire that had obviously happened inside her microwave. And I don't to this day know how she put it out,
why it didn't set the smoke alarms.
Exactly. And after seeing that, I opened up her microwave, and I was shocked to see that there had clearly been a fire in there, that she had put pots and pans into her microwave to heat herself up something. And to this day, I don't know how that situation didn't end up so much worse, I don't know how
the smoke detectors didn't go off and alert somebody.
To this day, I'm not sure how, and I'm not sure why the sprinkler system didn't go off, or the smoke detectors didn't go off that day, but that was definitely
A deciding day.
That was definitely a day that we were on the phone, which we were constantly through this process, and just in life in general, we're always on the phone with one another, but those calls were so much more frequent, and that was definitely a deciding day. And just before Christmas, where we said we need to get everyone in the family together and make a decision about what Grandma should do and where Grandma should go. And although everyone agreed Grandma couldn't live on her own any longer, I was really the only one, well, I think me and you were the only ones that felt that Grandma should live with me. And there was no question in my mind that that's where Grandma needed to be. I knew the importance of family, for Grandma to be with people that knew her, that loved her, that knew her routine, could keep her as engaged as possible and keep life as normal as possible for Grandma. And at that time, my little girls were 2 and 3, and they grew up going to Grandma's house, going to Gigi's house multiple times a day.
Yes.
And I didn't want their life to change either. And it was so important to me. So I was fortunate enough, I think you and I both, to sort of win out that
And I know you talked to my uncles, and yeah.
And I know that was a difficult decision. Ultimately, you had to go to your brothers to really campaign for Grandma to come and live with me. And I was so fortunate that you were able to persuade them. And ultimately, as a family, we decided that Grandma would come just after Christmas.
Yeah, they thought it would be such a burden on you and your young family.
No, and I remember having that conversation, which was a difficult conversation right at Christmas with our family about the burden and my two little girls and my husband and how much that would change at our home. And I said, I'm already devoting so much time and energy to Grandma outside of my home. I might be able to give more attention to my family and to Grandma if everything's inside my home. And I was really adamant, and it was very important to me. So just after Christmas that year, I think it was January 2nd, I went and I brought Grandma. And initially, Grandma stayed in what would have been our dining room. It was closed off, but it was near to the kitchen. It was near to a restroom. It was on the first floor. And it made sense at the time.
It did.
And we made it as homey as you can make it for Grandma.
Even made that little room with her knickknacks, and
she had her curio and her tables and Grandma and her things, and an apartment. But we liked Grandma being right there off the kitchen, and I was able to hear her when she was ready to get up in the morning, would get her up. She'd come right out to the kitchen, eat breakfast with the family, and she thought it was temporary initially.
She did.
And the best part was that she thought she was there to help me with the kids. So she never questioned what...
That's right.
So she never questioned, why am I here? Why can't I go home? Because she thought I'm doing Kylie a favor. And in some ways, I mean, it was very reciprocal. She was doing for me and I was doing for her. But we knew she can't live in the dining room forever. And with the family, we decided to put an apartment in for Grandma, which was an undertaking. And at the time that we started the construction on the apartment, it was in my basement. And we planned a really lovely handicap accessible bathroom. Grandma at the time that Grandma was living with me, she still walked perfectly fine on her own. She sometimes walked with a cane, but you know how that was. She'd walk with it over here and leave it and then continue walking just fine. So stairs weren't an issue, walking around the home wasn't an issue, and the apartment we planned for her was in our basement, and the stairs had a turn, and we talked at length as a family about if we should put in a chairlift for Grandma to go up and down the stairs. And at that time, it seemed unfathomable that she would need that and that we would cross that bridge when we came to it. But unfortunately, in just a matter of months, while her apartment, her suite in the basement was being constructed, her needs started to change, and it no longer seemed safe that she would be able to go up and down the stairs. And cognitively, we were noticing that this was happening at a much more rapid pace.
Can bringing about her getting a UTI, that drug sepsis, set her back.
When was that?
And you got married.
Oh, yeah.
Which is the choice you guys had to, because we moved your room downstairs when you guys were.
That was right on my honeymoon.
I don't know if you want to say
I'm
that,
not going to say that.
but
My kids And Grandma was so predisposed to UTIs, urinary tract infections, and it seemed that no matter what I did, and I felt truly responsible, the more I bathe her, the more that she stays hydrated, the more cranberry juice she can have every day.
Yeah.
Whatever I could do, I felt responsible. But for her, but grandma in general in life day to day would have UTIs up until this point. But unfortunately, as her Alzheimer's progressed and she would have those urinary tract infections, it would set her so far back. And she ultimately had one about 8 months or so after she started living with us that set her so far back that we knew the dining room isn't going to work for her anymore. This suite is about finished. She cannot move down there. That my husband and I actually gave up our master bedroom on the first floor to grandma so that she had space, that she was safe, and that her restroom was right there, and that she was in the center of the hub of home, and that I knew I could take care of her. And that way I knew that I could take care of her and she would stay safe. And she would stay safe. And we joke, at the time, my husband moved down into this lovely brand new bedroom with a beautiful handicap accessible bathroom. And the thought was that I would stay down there also.
So true.
But with grandma on the first floor
and the kids up
and my daughters on the second floor, I couldn't possibly. So I spent most of my time pretty close to grandma and the girls, and everyone in our family was so concerned about that dynamic. But I never questioned it. I knew that that's what I needed to do.
Say that you slept in the guest room.
Okay.
Say that, because I don't want people to think there's some apartment that John went to and you were.
Okay. So ultimately, I slept in the guest room, and we had a sensor system for grandma in her room. And if she put her feet over the edge of the bed, my alarm went off, and I was down there to help her get up, go to the bathroom, whatever she needed to do. And we had a great routine. And initially, at that step, she wasn't safe to get up and ambulate around the home on her own. She wasn't safe to get up and walk around the home on her own. So I had my alarm systems in place, my cameras in place. And it got to the point where I really couldn't leave without someone being there with grandma, which sometimes was family, but with the little girls, and they were in preschool at the time and ballet and some things. While I felt comfortable leaving for maybe just a minute or two to drop them off somewhere or pick them up, I wasn't comfortable going out for long periods of time. So we did hire personal care aides through various agencies. So we did hire some personal care aides through various agencies. And ultimately, as her needs progressed, it was unfortunate, but I wasn't able to meet her needs at home any longer. And it was another uncomfortable conversation for our family, but she was a 2-person assist, and she needed one-on-one care really around the clock. And my kids were getting a little bit older and in a few more activities, and it broke my heart, but we had to look at some other options. And we were fortunate that there was a memory care unit in my neighborhood very close by that I knew I might not be able to spend hours with grandma every day anymore, but I can go in and out of here pretty frequently throughout the day. And that was so important for all of us to hold the facility accountable and to be present in grandma's life as often as we could. As she declined and as she was unable to really communicate with us, to really speak at all, to really eat, she never forgot who we were. She still smiled when she saw us. You could still look in grandma's eyes and know that she knew who you were. although it broke my heart for Grandma to have to go to the memory care unit, it was apparent that she still felt our presence.
Yes.
And every time we were there, I do know that we connected with her, and that she couldn't verbalize it, and she might not have always reached her hands up to hug us, but I know that when I hugged her, that she really felt it. And I know how important it was for both of us that we were still or for me, that I know how important it was for both of us that I was there as frequently, that we were all able to be there as much as we were, even if she couldn't say to us, although I wish Grandma would have never had Alzheimer's at all, and I wish that this disease wouldn't have impacted her in our lives, it's so important now for us because we lived this with Grandma. This impacted not just you and I, but my uncles, my cousins, my children. And it's so important for us now that even though this disease took Grandma from us, it didn't take,
We learned so much.
yeah. It's so important that we had each other.
Yes.
And that we learned so much about this. And I can't say that I did the right thing every time, but I was so fortunate to have a support system in our family and to have a support system in you with the frequent phone calls and just being able to talk it through with you, not just as my mother and not just as Grandma's daughter, but as a healthcare professional. It was so important to be able to work through it and to see now how Grandma's life with Alzheimer's has impacted all of us.
Yeah.
I wouldn't change for a second anything that I ever did with Grandma. It was so important for me to be her caregiver and for her to be at home with me. And even though she's been gone now just a few months,
Yeah.
although Grandma's only been gone a few months, I do ask myself frequently, would I do it again? And although I know it benefited Grandma to be at home with us for as long as she was, I actually see more of a beneficial impact on how it had in my life.
Yeah.
I actually see a more beneficial impact on my life and the life of my children, and my marriage even. It was hard, and it prompted a lot of conversations between my husband and I and my mom.
We faced a lot of challenges
Yeah.
together.
It prompted a lot of conversations between my husband and my children and with you, and we faced a lot of challenges, but we were able to face them together. And I see the impact that Grandma's life had on my family. Although my children are young still,
Yeah.
I know that their experience with Grandma in our home helped build empathy and strength, and we had some scary times,
Yeah.
and we had some fun times,
Yeah.
and they miss Grandma very much. Although it was beneficial to Grandma's life to be living with family and to be in our home, I see how it greatly impacted our lives as well, especially my children, to learn empathy and unconditional love, and to see, honestly, to see hard work and responsibility and the value in life. And although Grandma may not have been able to speak with them and to tell them how much she loved them, I know that they felt it. And that's so important to me because they're young. I don't fear that they won't remember Grandma. I don't fear that they won't remember Gigi, because I know that she has left. Because I know she has left a forever impact on them. And if I could change anything in our journey, I just wish it could have been a little longer.
Yeah.